For daily Ask Reddit. r/Ask Reddit. It workers. What is the most ridiculous URIT? You have to fix this request you've received. If you like the video, drop a like and subscribe so you never miss a video. Old story. Back in the early 90s all of Alaska's comm was via satellite. We would get notices from our providers when a solar storm was going to slow down our throughput. I went upstairs to our finance and accounting chief to tell her the nightly processes might be late due to the storm. Her response was, "You're it, just fix it." Never let her forget that she saw me as a god. Our help desk, before it was renamed the support desk, eventually ended up keeping fluorescent tubes and whiteboard markers in stock because people would send complaints to the CEO that we were refusing to help when we asked them to contact the office manager for these things. The flip side is that the CEO eventually created a new email address for people to send complaints directly to him. Very few people knew that this special CEO complaints email address actually got forwarded to the office manager. People have the capacity for such unimaginable greatness and such hard to believe stupidity. I was personally once reported for sabotaging a specific secretary by refusing to fix her printer. It was printing garbage. Turns out she installed an Epson color printer driver from the disk that came with her friend's new color printer on her Win95 computer so that her Mono HP DeskJet printer would also print color. She reported me the third time I uninstalled the bad driver and asked her not to do it again. I've somehow become the Apple guy at my work. We recently received a batch of brand new iPad Pros, and within a week, I received a repair request due to a screen malfunctioning. Turns out by screen malfunctioning they meant completely destroyed. Shattered. Like it had been continuously hit with a hammer. Lady is giving vague explanations about what happened, talking about how it might have fallen off her desk onto the carpeted floor. But apparently this is something I can fix. She needed it for a meeting that afternoon. I had to explain that this isn't something we can fix, that I'll need to go through Apple for a replacement device. Shocking news, apparently. Back in my very early career I had this customer named Mr. Windsor. He was this grumpy older guy and everything was an emergency, and he was always yelling about some issue he was having. The most memorable is he called us livid over some site he was getting a forbidden error on. How dare we forbid him from going to his website? I had to patiently explain that there was an issue with that site and he'd have to contact the owner. About an hour later he calls back demanding to speak to me personally. He got an email saying he had a fatal error. How dare we wish him to die? Finally figured out that he'd misspelled the email address and the fatal error was coming from the mail system. I just looked up the number to the web company and told him to call. I'd love to know how that conversation went. Anyway, a few days before Christmas we get a phone call. It's Mr. Windsor. He is slurring his words and clearly been drinking something festive. He called to apologize for being a miserable old duffer and thank us for being patient. Back to his usual miserable self after Christmas, of course. Interesting character. Early in my career, when I still did home user work, I had a client request an on-site because every time I go get a beer, my computer crashes. Wouldn't crash when he went to the bathroom or anything, just when he went to get a beer. So I'm staring at this computer and I can see in the logs that there are crashes but nothing that would help me understand what was causing it, because it's not the beers. Finally I'm grasping at straws and ask him to show me what he does when it crashes. He says, "I told you, it crashes when I go get a beer." So I'm like, "Just humor me." He sits down in the chair and then stands up, walks clean to the other side of the house. Huge open living room thing with one of those weird sunken conversation pit things and heavy shag carpet. Walks up to this built-in mini fridge, opens it, grabs a beer, closes it, starts walking back, and opens the beer, and the computer what the duck? Took about 30 seconds of feeling like the world had gone mad and this dude was like some sort of weird beer magician. When the light bulb came on, the mini fridge was probably on the same circuit as a PC. The compressor in the mini fridge was going bad and drawing too much from the circuit. When it kicked in, brown out, and the computer would crash. Dude was right all along. His computer would crash whenever he went to get a beer. Lady called to report her monitor wasn't working. After troubleshooting and asking her multiple times if everything was plugged in, she finally pipes up that the monitor doesn't have the light on. The monitor wasn't plugged in, and she wanted me to wake a guy up at 3 AM to do it because she was dressed too nicely to do it herself because she was preparing for a meeting at 6 AM. Told her to do it herself because I was not about to wake up the on-call for that. She complained to our director and he literally laughed at her and her reasoning for wanting the on-call sent out, and she is now banned from calling in. I had a doctor ask why the state's death certificate database didn't work for him over the weekend. Mind you, I didn't work for the state. I worked for a practice he did contract work for. I told him they were probably offline for maintenance when he tried to log in, but that wasn't good enough. He insisted I get a hold of the state's IT department and find out what happened. The database was working just fine when he asked BTW, as he brought the working site up on his iPad right in front of me. So a week goes by, and he is in my office again, and asks if I had any luck with the state IT department. I had completely forgotten about his absurd request, so I said the following. As it turns out, I did. They told me some clod in their department decided to microwave a hot pocket on his lunch break, but accidentally left a fork in with it. The microwave blew a breaker that controlled the server room. Knocked everything offline for a bit until they got it back up and running. Everything should be fine now. He was satisfied and walked away. Sometimes, people don't care what the answer is, just as long as they get one.